In this series, we cover the many products, promos, and pack-ins available to support Dungeon Masters and players within the world of Eberron. In this video, we'll be reviewing the first adventure product released for Eberron, Shadows of the Last War. This is Eberron Collector. Shadows of the Last War had an indelible impact on the course of the development of the world of Eberron. Overall, it is a well-structured adventure that picks up right after the introductory adventure from the Eberron campaign setting itself. Before we start getting into potential spoiler story, let's go over the basic stats of the release. Shadows of the Last War was released in July of 2004, so that's just 1 month after the campaign setting itself. The adventure was written by setting designer Keith Baker, with additional design and development work from the director of RPG R&D at that time, Bill Slavicsek, full-color cover art from Wayne Reynolds, and I'll pop the uncropped art on screen now, as it doesn't appear anywhere in the book itself. Interior art is entirely black and white and is by Tony Castillo. The cartography was done by the same team that was on the campaign setting itself, Dennis Koth and Rob Lazzaretti. The adventure was written in the revised 3rd edition of the Rules of D&D, usually called 3.5, and is intended to be played by second-level characters when they start. Not counting the covers, which are glossy on the outside and blank matte white on the inside, the book is 32 pages long and staple bound. Its dimensions are more or less the standard size for gaming products, just shy of 8 inches by 11 inches. That's basically 21 centimeters by 28 centimeters for us metric folk. So it fits in with most D&D products. The adventure was shrink-wrapped with a short story included, which I'll get back to momentarily. The only other format the adventure is available in is a digital product from the DM's Guild or Drive-Thru RPG. The digital product is the only Eberron book that they have that is a scan only, instead of being a PDF based on original digital files. So that's not ideal. But it's a very clean scan, and I doubt you'd be disappointed in its quality if you purchase it there. Unfortunately, the digital version is not accompanied by the Death at Whitehearth short story. We're going to do a full video covering that story separately, but let me go over it briefly here as well. It's a black and white and yellow printing, written by Keith Baker, with cover art and interior watermark art, both renditions of Steve Prescott pieces, The Creation Forge and Warforged, both originally in the Eberron campaign setting. The adventure is 14 pages of story, plus the front and back cover, all on glossy paper, which is 6 by 9 inches or 16 by 23 centimeters. The short story is about the same adventuring party that appears in Keith Baker's Dreaming Dark trilogy, following them into the Whitehearth facility that is a key location in the main adventure. This story takes place before the Day of Mourning. It's a bit hard to find sealed copies of Shadows of the Last War that would include the story, but luckily the story also appears in the story collection Tales from the Last War, which is still easily available as an ebook or audiobook or on the secondhand market in its original paperback form. Okay, now that we have covered the physical product, let's talk about the adventure itself. I'll break this up into a few sections. I'm going to start out with a mostly spoiler-free overview of the adventure's story and themes at a level that should be reasonably spoiler-free. Then I'll go through a more spoiler-full step-by-step run-through of the story beats. As we go, I'll evaluate the adventure as it was written in context for 3.5. That will be followed by a section looking at the major NPCs, then a look at what you'd need to convert the adventure to 5th edition, including stats for monsters, NPCs, the magic items that appear, and all of that, and other new rules. We'll do a quick section about known cut content. Then, finally, I want to look at the adventure's impact and elements that would be carried to later adventures and other parts of Eberron. This section and the conclusion should be pretty safe if you're looking to avoid spoiling yourself, and I will have chapters set on each section of the video so you can skip over sections if you are trying to avoid spoilers, if you're going to be playing the adventure or something like that in the future. Shadows of the Last War picks up right after the end of the Forgotten Forge, with only a few days or weeks of downtime implied to be in between them. The adventure starts off with a local Civis message station being ransacked by familiar enemies trying to intercept a message from the party's benefactor, Lady Eberron de Kenneth. She is able to get them a message anyway, and sends the party off on a mission to gather the next MacGuffin related to the schema found in their Forgotten Forge. From there, the primary antagonists switch from the Blades to the Emerald Claw, as the party follows a pretty linear story with a couple branches, but always pulling back to the same path. Finding the location of the MacGuffin, and get it before the antagonists do. The item is within the Mournland, where a secret camp facility turns into a pretty classic dungeon crawl to close out the adventure. So the first scene detailed in the adventure takes place in the message station that Lady Eberron asked the party to check in on regularly if she had additional jobs for them. The party arrives, finding the place ransacked, and there was a message that was waiting for them, but it had been stolen. You might think that this leads to a combat or a mystery. Neither are really true. A few minor clues can be gathered about the attackers, but this is more a mood-setting scene, as if you don't notice the clues or get the clerk to talk, the course of the adventure does not really change. As soon as the group leaves the station, a giant owl messenger arrives with a second message from Eberron, advising to meet back at the Broken Anvil Inn, another recurring location from the Forgotten Forge. The adventure luckily has suggestions on what to do if the party attacks the owl, misinterpreting the arrival of the giant owl as an attack against them or a continuation on the attack of the station. So that part is well handled. This owl scene was illustrated, but unfortunately that didn't actually make the book. In the Broken Anvil, Eberron arrives after the party does, and appears quite different than she did last in the Forgotten Forge. Instead of glamour weave finery, she is in a mud-spattered traveler's outfit, and is disheveled and desperate. She then presents the party with a Heward's handy haversack, including a number of resources that will be needed for the adventure, and written instructions. Before the party can even confirm that they will take the job, the inn is attacked by the same band that ransacked the Civis station. The identity of the attackers partially depends on what happened in the final encounter of the Forgotten Forge. I'll talk more about that in the NPC section, but the attack is led by a Blades devotee. The Warforged hired a band of kobolds to fight with him, and they are trying to get the schema the party recovered in the last adventure. The encounter has good tactical and role-playing suggestions to give you a good starting point for running the NPCs, and if things start going badly, Eberron escapes using magic to ensure she is around for future plot points. This is the last encounter with the Blades in this adventure, but they do come back into play in one of the later adventures in the path. I think this opening to the adventure is pretty strong. The first scene isn't strictly necessary, but handled well can make for some good role-playing opportunities and rising tension before the fight in the inn. The fight works, but I don't love that the Blade hired fleshy kobolds to assist him. It was likely done to save space, just reference a monster from the monster manual, but equivalent Sierra constructs would make more thematic sense, or what I would personally do if I was running the adventure now, use the Kobold basic stats, but have them described as a band of small-sized Warforged scouts, as they would later appear in Monster Manual 3. A note in the haversack leaves the party onto the quest. The adventure has the whole letter written out. Sadly, while it would make a great player handout, there's no easy way to make one with the adventure text around it the way it appears in the adventure, though the image of the sheet of paper was in the adventure's online art gallery, so you could recreate it yourself, as I have done here. Eladrin wants the group to head to Dargoon to meet up with a contact who can take them to a ruined mining town, which should have clues on the location of the actual goal, Whitehearth, and eventually the second schema, similar to the one they found in the previous adventure. The group is also directed to 2 methods of travel to Dargoon. Eladrin has prepaid whichever the party wants to use, to go by Elemental Galleon or by Lightning Rail. While a bit, pardon the pun, railroady, the party is given 2 legitimate choices. And since this is likely only their second adventure, the actual players may not really know much about Eberron yet, so this actually gives them a easy choice and good way of learning about Eberron's methods of travel. The overland path takes a little longer overall, having the party get partway very quickly, then much slower by switching to caravan travel, but will tend to be a little safer. Despite that, this route will have the caravan ambushed by a Margul war party, ignoring their banner of safe passage. The route over sea only takes a few days compared to a little over 2 weeks for the overland route, but is a bit more dangerous due to some of the areas it is passing through. This route has an encounter as well, with a group of skeletons emerging from the water, hinting at the real main antagonists of this adventure, the Emerald Claw. These encounters provide little to the plot and could easily be skipped for an Indiana Jones-style dotted line approach. And the group is additionally paid for assisting the protection of the caravan or ship in either case. So the branches to the adventure means little overall, as they are not directly adding to the plot or emerging as a result of character actions. I like to think them more like a form of scripted random encounters. Arrival in Rukon Drawl is where the adventure opens up a bunch. There's no prescribed way on how to find their contact Phelan, which is both a good and a bad thing. The Bloody Market is open for the players to explore, though very few details are actually given about it. Some skill or bribery-based methods for locating Phelan are given, but since he is essential to the plot, as he actually knows where Rose Quarry is, a backup plan on how to connect the party with him really should have been given just in case the characters don't have particularly good social skills. Once they do find Phelan, negotiate a price for transport with them, and set off, after a sidetrack due to some bugbears coming to collect on a debt that Phelan owes them, the party sets off to Rose Quarry on Phelan's unique Earth Elemental land cart. Rose Quarry is a little north of the ruined city of Learenton, and was a small town centered on a Cannith quarry that supplied red marble to most of Corvair prior to the war. But it was absolutely destroyed in the last war by being covered in molten glass. The adventure specifically has the party arrive after dark to make sure that they notice the lights of people already in the ruins of the town. The adventure as written has a pretty specific set of expectations of what the party will do now that they have arrived. First, that they will start acting immediately to search the ruins on the night that they arrive. Second, that they are likely not going to attack the main camp full of Emerald Claw soldiers, and instead try to explore other parts of the ruin. Now, these are fairly likely results, especially after the party sees the size of the Emerald Claw forces in the main camp. There are a number of other sites around the ruins, with zombies, mainly dwarves, raised by the Claw necromancers and covered in glass. Glass that is also covering nearly everything in the village. Some of these zombies are set to dig out buildings from the glass, and others are walking around the area set to attack anyone not wearing the insignia of the Emerald Claw. There are 2 sites of actual interest, the old refinery and the ruined church. The church has an encounter with Garrow, who appears as an emaciated man with fangs and some powers of a vampire. Garrow has zombies exhuming more bodies for the Claw's labor force, and possibly to extract information from them using the Speak with Dead spell. Garrow avoids engaging in combat with the party and immediately calls for other members of the Claw to fight for him, and he disappears in a cloud of mist. The refinery is what the party is actually looking for in Rose Quarry. When the party arrives, the Claw Battalion's military commander is overseeing its excavation by a single dwarf glass-covered zombie. The location being excavated is a large-scale map, which is also a puzzle. The party will need to defeat the soldiers and zombie before they can examine the puzzle properly. The puzzle is basically that there is a list of secret facilities corresponding to distance from the 6 big statues in the room. If the party figures out the puzzle, they can head about 30 miles into the Mournland and get to Whitehearth. While I like the environment of this location-based section of the adventure, it has a lot of issues if the players don't follow all of the adventure's expectations, and little to help nudge them back on the right path. First, no guidance is given on what to do if the players decide to wait for daylight, or try to use hit-and-run tactics to pull small groups of soldiers out of the town to take them out, for example. There is a mention about what to do if the players want to try to talk their way through the encounter. It basically lends no credence to that as being a reasonable solution, though. Another issue is the size of the area. It's way too small. Basically, everything is close enough that a combat anywhere on the map is going to be loud enough back at the camp that it should pull in basically the whole force. Fighting is loud. Instead, they just have a couple of soldiers brought in to investigate. Finally, there is no skill or mechanics-based suggestions on how to solve the puzzle of the map. It relies entirely on the players figuring it out, not on the characters. It's not hard to figure out that the distance would be measured in human strides, in directions from the appropriate statue, but especially without an illustration or a map that can be shared of the area to help the players along with their understanding of the area, they might struggle to figure it out, and that will halt the adventure to a standstill. The old online art gallery did have this illustration that I think was supposed to be this area, but it's not clear, and it didn't make it into the book anyway. All of these issues can be solved easily by an experienced dungeon master, and I can suggest right off that doubling the size of the scale of the Rose Quarry map can be done to fix the closeness problems and have it reasonable that the entire Emerald Claw encampment isn't pulled into every fight. But for the rest, that new DMs are going to force the players back onto the exact rails that the adventure was written with, instead of nudging them back towards it, and that's going to be a less great experience for the players. The players then head for the edge of the mists on stolen horses with Phelan or on foot. Phelan takes convincing to take them even to the edge of the mist, and even more to go inside. Before reaching Whitehearth, there are 2 encounters in the Twisted Lands. The first is a battle against some creepy, deformed wolf skeletons that have incorporated human bones as well. The second is the sight of mounted corpses, both from the Day of Mourning and halfling and Valinor elves roving through the region, meeting and killing each other. The corpses of the Siren forces are just as fresh as the recently dead nomad scavengers and Pteranodol warriors. Their opponent in this battle is a carcass crab, a monster adapted from the Eberron campaign setting that gathers bodies. This collection of bodies is the largest source of magic items and other valuables in the entire adventure, assuming the party is willing to search and strip the bodies. After these, essentially scripted random encounters, the party finds the entrance to Whitehearth, the mouth of a mine. Before they go in, they are harassed by a zombified vulture in the control of Garrow, though there's nothing to indicate to the players that it's being controlled by him from a distance. The adventurer expects that they destroy the vulture before they head into Whitehearth and the final part of the adventure. Whitehearth is a very interesting facility. It's secret. Not even most Cannith members know where it is or what was done there in the war. The true entrance and a number of false entrances as well are hidden in the mine and trapped. Once the party locates the correct entrance and figures out that they need to use the strange key charm that Eladrin provided them, they proceed within. The facility itself is based on 3 radial hallways centered with elaborate rotating rooms. The key charms are color-coded, and in concert with the rotating spheres at the center of the spokes, lock off different parts of the dungeon until you have explored other parts of the facility and located the right colored key charm. I'm not going to go over every room, but some of the key areas are the one with Horsa, the awakened dire wolf, who is looking to free wolves held captive by an experimental half-golem wolf in another part of the facility. There are other areas with hidden keys, magic gone wild in the form of living spells, and a room that lets you scry ahead to the location of the schema, and even a trap in one of the rotating spheres that drops people down into a well to drown if they don't first recover another specific key charm. The schema can be found in a room containing an eldritch machine gone wild. It's also the source of the molten glass that destroyed Rose Quarry. After dispatching some fire elementals, the party is able to recover some treasure, the schema, plus an exact copy made by Whitehearth's artificers, and a creation pattern, with slots that the schema can slot into. The one from the Forgotten Forge here, and the new one here. I'm not going to be particularly critical of this section of the adventure. For the most part, while it's a bit linear, when you look at it closely, it's not going to feel that way to the players, because they will have a lot of choices to make as they go through the dungeon. Just some areas are blocked off, which they won't realize until they try to go through that direction. And there isn't any glaring bits where information was left out or important alternatives not given. Once the party decides to leave the facility, they are ambushed by Garrow and a bunch of his skeleton servants, plus some additional claw forces if they survived Rose Quarry. Basically, he was trying to get the party to do the dirty work finding the schema, and then wants to take it off them. This time, he will fight until the party is all down or have surrendered, and then will steal the schema and its copy, assuming they find both, but leaving the creation pattern not knowing exactly what it is. Despite what Garrow says, he will leave the party to die instead of killing and raising them, giving them the chance to stabilize and be healed or rescued. There are a few other outcomes that can happen. Offering the copy of the schema instead of fighting has Garrow leave with it, but will still have a smaller force attack the party to try to kill them afterwards. The unlikely result of the party fighting the whole force without giving up anything and actually winning is not something that it really covers, but it's pretty easy to extrapolate. You just need to make sure that Garrow survives to appear again in the following adventures. At that point, the party just needs to make their way back to Rukandral and meet Lady Eladrin to give her the fruits of the party's labor. Plus, that Garrow let slip that the Claw has one of the schema already themselves. Before heading along to the next section of the video, I do want to note one overall issue with the adventure if you are running it in its original 3.5 incarnation. The rules for the Mornland, that no natural or most forms of magical healing work from the Eberron campaign setting, had not yet been finalized when this adventure was designed. And if you use those exact rules, it makes the whole adventure much more difficult than intended. Make sure that you take that into account if you are running it under 3.5. Perhaps healing works a bit more normally within the facility, or something like that. Lady Eladrin de Cannith. She's also a key character from the Forgotten Forge and the rest of the Schema adventure path. She is a dragon-marked heir of House Cannith, working for Baron Merrix de Cannith of Cannith South, though she is pretending to be working with Cannith West instead. The adventure mostly gives that as background, with not much information on how to convey there is any sort of subterfuge going on to the players. Warforged opponent. The leader of the band of attackers in the early phases of the adventure will be Saber, if he survived the events of the Forgotten Forge. Otherwise, it's a new Warforged follower of the Lord of Blades called Cutlass. In either case, not much information is given about them other than their hatred of non-Warforged, and also the insults they will throw out at Warforged protagonists for not working with the Lord of Blades. Phelan. He's a disowned dragon-marked heir of Orion, exiled for smuggling. It's not clear if he was excoriated from the house or just shunned. He's the sole owner of an experimental elemental land cart that he kept from his time in House Orion. Unfortunately, the cart itself was not illustrated. Emerald Claw Forces. There are 3 named NPCs, other than Garrow, among the forces of the Claw. They are all human: Kellis Doran, a cleric of the Blood of Vol, Melora, a necromancer, and Kayla, the fighter and military commander of the brigade. Little information is given on their personalities, other than that Kayla especially hates followers of the Silver Flame. Rorsa. A dire wolf awoken by the morning. She cares for 2 other wolves and wishes to free a bunch more that are held captive. A strange creature to have as a friendly NPC, but she helps solidify the strangeness of the Mornland. Garrow. The primary villain of the adventure. While he is presented as a vampire, he's not, though he wishes he was one. He's a changeling cleric of the Blood of Vol. He needs to use spells and potions to replicate the effects of vampire abilities. The players do have the resources to find out that he is faking. They were even given holy water as part of their supplies. This adventure is quite easy to adapt between editions. I personally ran it under its original 3rd edition rules and did a conversion to 4th edition a number of years ago as well. Many monsters can be pulled right out of the 5th edition monster manual. These are kobolds, goblins, hobgoblins, bugbears, skeletons, which work for both normal skeletons and the creepy wolf ones, regular wolves, and then for the dwarf glass zombies and vulture zombie, the stats only need a very small amount of changes from the standard. Basically something to make the glass zombies a bit hardier to reflect the glass covering their bodies, and a fly speed and size change for the vulture. The 2 medium fire elementals from the Eldritch Machines room can be substituted for a single fire elemental from the monster manual for a similar challenge. Likewise, the bandit stats can be used for the generic Emerald Claw soldiers. The bandit captain for Kayla, the cult fanatic for Melora, maybe with some spells switched out to make her more necromancy, and priest for Keltis, switching divine eminence to do necrotic damage and swapping a couple spells. Finally, for Rorsa, you can use the direwolf stats that make her intelligence 10 and able to speak common. From Eberron Rising from the Last War, you can get the Living Burning Hands to sub in for the Living Flaming Sphere, and you'll need to use the Customizing a Living Spell section of the book to create a Living Color Spray. The Warforged stat block just needs to be toughened up a bit and can work for Cutlass or Saber. So from there, you'll need custom stats for Garrow, the Carcass Crab, and Half Golem Wolf. You'll also need to convert some traps and magic items, and come up with some sort of new Mournland-related rules, as those were not provided in the Rising from the Last War book. For the Carcass Crab, note that the stats from the adventure are incorrect and did receive some errata, and that the version from the Eberron campaign setting is actually double the challenge rating than the one in the adventure. So keep those both in mind when you're designing. I do also quickly want to mention that on the DM's Guild, somebody has already done all this work for you, plus added some additional NPCs and encounters to the adventure to help string it together. It's written by Stuart Brose, and while I haven't used this particular conversion, I did make use of his Forgotten Forge conversion, and it was of very high quality. A link to that conversion is in the description. There's a new spell, Undead Eyes. It's a 2nd level spell that allows the spellcaster to see through an undead creature's eyes and control them from a distance. It's how Garrow spies on the party and controls the vulture zombie. But there's no reason this can't just be done without specific mechanics for it. 99.9% of the time, the players won't even realize this is happening anyway. There's a new magic item, Eladra's Chalice. It's a cup that can purify liquids and turn normal water into holy water, but is only usable by clerics of the host. It can practically be used as written in 5th edition already. No reason to need to convert it. And finally, there is a new intelligent magic item, Talayan Kara, the Bold Stallion, which is a magic double-bladed scimitar with the personality of a Valinor horse. To convert it to 5th, you will need to decide if it holds the essence of a 3rd edition style Valinor warhorse, or the more magical and intelligent 5th edition style one. The eye on the corner will take you to a video all about Valinor animals, especially horses, and which does talk about the changes made to Valinor horses in the edition changes. The official errata for the adventure also has a correction confirming that both ends of the swords are magical with a +1 bonus. Double weapons could have different enchantments and plus bonuses in 3rd edition. There are a bunch of other magic items in the book to be given as treasure, but they are all pretty much just ones that are core in 3rd edition, and for the most part have exact 5th edition equivalent ones. I have already mentioned or shown 3 pieces of art that were commissioned, but cut from the book before published. There was one more, but let's quickly review all 4. The first is a messenger giant owl in Sharn from near the beginning of the adventure. The second is the dire wolf named Rorsa. The third is probably a site in Rose Quarry with a puzzle, though I'm not certain. And fourth is some sort of room. It could be one of the rooms in Whitehearth, or maybe something else. It's really not clear. And one more, actually. When editing, I noticed that I forgot this unnamed dwarf. The character themselves was likely cut from the adventure. So I don't really blame the editors for cutting the last 2, though I do wish something was there to show players the puzzle. The loss of the owl and picture of Rorsa are felt more. I'd rather have these illustrations than the character portraits for most of the Emerald Claw leaders. Shadows of the Last War was a leader in how to look at adventures in Eberron. Only one adventure preceded it within a setting, the Forgotten Forge, which was in the campaign setting itself. Thus, it set and confirmed a number of precedents for adventures, and lived up to a number of D&D and Eberron tropes. It follows a pretty linear, some might say railroady, story structure, but that helps it capture Eberron themes of both pulp action and noir film. The adventure starts off like it's going to be noir-tinged, the mysterious attack in the rain of Sharn and all, then a distressed, mysterious woman looking for help. But after leaving Sharn, it embraces pulp adventure, traveling through multiple countries and high action, even delving into ruins and solving puzzles. I might have preferred it if it had zeroed in on one trope or another, though the Forgotten Forge is more noir than pulp, so the opening of the adventure might have been intentional as a way of bridging to the alternative style of storytelling. Most Eberron adventures subsequent to this one also take the scripted, quote-unquote, random encounters that this adventure uses in both travel sequences. There's no real reason to use actual random tables if the adventure is going to be mostly linear anyway. And the adventure ends on a classic D&D dungeon crawl, and that's a common choice for many Eberron adventures afterwards. And finally, I'm quite certain that the title has influenced the name of a large number of Eberron adventures that went up for sale after this, going with the blank of the blank blank title structure. Though, to be fair, that's pretty common in fantasy novels in general as well. So altogether, while this adventure has some issues with being linear, I think that most groups are going to buy in and not realize that they are on a railroad, and they will enjoy the ride. The writing is crisp and not overloaded with extraneous backstory that won't be relevant. The boxed text is all quite useful, and the times I read on the adventure, I read from them more or less verbatim. They weren't taking the players out of the action and didn't prescribe player behaviors or feelings, like adventure text can do sometimes. By that I mean something like, you look up and see the mist swirling around the lighthouse. As you walk towards it, you feel something stirring inside you, as descriptive text. The Rose Quarry and Bloody Market portions of the adventure have quite a few issues. A good DM can work around them, but there definitely should have been more help for the DM if and when the players get stuck or go off the standard path. I would guess a lot of the material was written by Keith Baker when designing the adventure. Most of it had to be cut for space due to the very short length of the adventure. The errata for the adventure isn't particularly relevant for fixing the adventure's issues, it's just fixing a few stats that were a bit off. Overall, I'd rate the adventure quite highly despite its issues. A 7 out of 10. There is a reason I have run the adventure twice already. I'd love to see it officially compiled and brought into 5th edition, so it can have its flaws fixed. So thanks for watching all the way through. The script for the video ended up almost half of the length of the full adventure itself. If you ever run the adventure, I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments, especially if your group ran into some of the adventure's pitfalls and how you dealt with them. The channel's last video on tieflings in Eberron had a big chunk of the script I wrote, then cut for time and format. I think it's still worthwhile and useful content, so I'm going to expand that material a bit and make the next video an addendum covering tiefling NPCs from adventures and characters that appear in the novels. Get subscribed to the channel so you don't miss a thing. As well, don't forget that Eberron Archaeologist is on Instagram and Twitter. I have a feature on Instagram where I show off Eberron Mini every week, usually ones I haven't featured in a video yet. And both accounts post channel news and whenever a new video goes live. Links to both are in the video description.